When I bought my lake house in the quiet community of Pine Hollow, I truly believed I had escaped the chaos of city life. The neighborhood looked like something from a postcard. Tall pine trees swaying in the wind, calm water reflecting the sunrise every morning, and birds singing so loudly at dawn that I stopped using an alarm clock entirely. Even the HOA brochures promised preservation of natural beauty and respect for private property. At the time, I believed every word they printed. That illusion shattered 3 months later. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the violent sound of chainsaws screaming through the woods behind my property. At first, I assumed a storm must have knocked down trees during the night, but when I stepped outside holding my coffee mug, I froze instantly. Construction crews were clearing land near the lake. Not trimming branches, not removing damaged trees. They were flattening an entire section of protected shoreline. I jumped into my golf cart and drove down the dirt trail behind my house. The closer I got, the worse it looked. Workers unloaded lumber from trucks, while bulldozers ripped through the forest floor. Huge trees crashed toward the ground, one after another. Then I saw him. Richard Hall, the president of the HOA, standing in the middle of the site, wearing a polo shirt and sunglasses, while barking orders at contractors, like he owned the entire lake. "Morning," he said smugly when he noticed me approaching. "What exactly are you building?" I asked. "A recreational cabin for the community," Richard replied casually. "Residents will be able to rent it for private events." I stared at him in disbelief. "You can't build here," I said. "This land is protected." Richard smiled like he enjoyed the confrontation. "The HOA board approved it unanimously. That doesn't make it legal." His expression immediately hardened. "You should focus on your own property." That sentence stayed in my head the entire day. Something about the entire situation felt deeply wrong. Before purchasing my house, I had spent weeks reviewing county maps and environmental records. The shoreline near the lake wasn't ordinary land. It connected directly to a protected water reserve. Any construction there required state approval, environmental inspections, and county permits. The HOA had none of those things. Over the next 2 weeks, construction became non-stop. Trucks rolled into the neighborhood before sunrise. Concrete mixers arrived daily. Massive floodlights illuminated the shoreline late into the night, while workers rushed to finish the structure. Residents started complaining online almost immediately. But strangely, every complaint posted in the HOA Facebook group vanished within minutes. Then the threats started. An elderly resident named Martha posted photos asking whether permits existed for the project. The very next morning, she received an HOA violation notice for having an improper mailbox color. Another resident was fined because his trash bin was visible from the street for too long. Everyone understood the message instantly: stay quiet. But I couldn't ignore what was happening. One evening after the workers left, I walked back down to the construction site alone. The cabin frame was nearly complete now, sitting absurdly close to the shoreline. What shocked me most wasn't the size of the building. It was the location. The structure stood barely 20 feet from the water itself. Then I noticed something else. A thick black pipe ran from the cabin site toward the lake. Curious, I followed it through the dirt trench until my stomach dropped. The pipe disappeared directly into the water. Suddenly, this wasn't just an illegal construction project anymore. Something dangerous was happening, and the HOA was hiding it from everyone. The next morning, I drove straight to the county office. I walked up to the permit desk and asked the clerk to search for any construction approvals connected to the lakeside cabin project. She typed quietly for about 30 seconds before frowning at her computer screen. "There aren't any permits filed," she said. I expected that answer, but hearing it officially confirmed made my chest tighten. "No environmental permits either?" I asked carefully. She shook her head. "Nothing under the HOA name at all." At that moment, the situation stopped feeling like neighborhood drama and became something much bigger. I asked whether county inspectors had visited the property recently. The clerk lowered her voice before answering. "We've received anonymous complaints already," she admitted. "But every time inspectors scheduled a visit, the HOA delayed access to the area." That sounded intentional. On the drive home, a terrible feeling settled into my stomach. And when I turned into my driveway, it got worse. 2 HOA SUVs were parked outside my house. Richard Hall stood near my garage, alongside another board member named Denise Carter. Neither looked happy to see me. "You've been asking questions," Richard said immediately. "I asked about permits," I replied. Denise crossed her arms tightly. "The board considers your behavior disruptive." I almost laughed from disbelief. "Disruptive? You built a cabin on protected shoreline land." Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't understand how much money this project will bring into the community." That single sentence exposed the truth. This was never about helping residents. The HOA planned to rent the cabin privately for weddings, parties, and corporate retreats. They were secretly turning protected shoreline into a business operation controlled entirely by the HOA board. And apparently, they believed nobody would stop them. Before leaving, Richard handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was an official HOA notice fining me $2,500 for harassment of board members. I stood there speechless. The HOA was trying to intimidate me into silence. Instead, it made me furious. That night, I started researching every board member online. Public records revealed something shocking almost immediately. Richard Hall owned a construction company specializing in luxury vacation rentals. Even worse, Denise Carter's brother operated a septic installation business. Then I remembered the black pipe near the shoreline. Close to midnight, I grabbed a flashlight and quietly walked back to the construction site. The generator still hummed near the unfinished cabin while the lake reflected moonlight across the water. I followed the pipe carefully again, and then I smelled it. Sewage. Raw sewage. The pipe wasn't draining rainwater. It was dumping waste directly into the lake. My hands started shaking instantly. Families swam there every summer. Children kayaked in that water. Residents fished from those docks every weekend. I pulled out my phone and started recording video evidence. Suddenly, bright headlights exploded through the trees behind me. I turned and saw Richard's truck racing down the dirt path toward the cabin. He slammed the brakes, jumped out, and started screaming, "What the hell are you doing here?" I backed away while still recording. "You're dumping sewage into the lake." Richard's face changed immediately. Not anger, panic. He lunged toward me trying to grab my phone, and in that exact moment, I realized how desperate he truly was. That's when I decided to call 911. My hands trembled as I dialed 911 beside the shoreline. Richard kept shouting while advancing toward me near the exposed sewage pipe. "He's trespassing," he yelled. "Turn that camera off right now." The dispatcher answered calmly at first, but the moment I explained there was an illegal sewage line dumping into a protected lake, her tone changed completely. "Sir, stay where you are," she said firmly. "Officers are already on the way." Richard heard every word, and he completely lost control. Instead of denying anything, he rushed toward the trench and started yanking at the exposed pipe, screaming for me to delete the video footage. That told me everything. He wasn't trying to defend the project anymore. He was trying to destroy evidence. Within 10 minutes, sheriff deputies arrived at the shoreline alongside county environmental officers. Flashing red and blue lights reflected across the dark lake while neighbors stepped outside their homes to watch the chaos unfolding near the water. Richard suddenly transformed into a different person. "It's all a misunderstanding," he told deputies with a nervous smile. Then one environmental officer walked toward the shoreline. I'll never forget the expression on his face. He crouched beside the pipe, inspected the liquid flowing into the lake, and immediately grabbed his radio. That's when everything exploded. More county vehicles arrived within the hour. Then, state environmental officials showed up before sunrise. The entire construction site was surrounded with caution tape while investigators photographed everything from the unfinished cabin to the exposed waistline. And the deeper authorities looked, the worse the situation became. The HOA had forged contractor approvals. The cabin violated and protected shoreline regulations. No septic permits existed anywhere in county records. No environmental inspections had ever been completed. And according to investigators, the HOA board had secretly used community funds to finance the project while planning to personally profit from private rentals. Residents were furious. By noon, angry neighbors crowded outside the clubhouse demanding emergency board resignations. Martha, the elderly woman fined over her mailbox, stood at the front holding printed copies of every violation issued. Against residents who questioned the project, people finally saw the pattern clearly. The HOA had weaponized fines to silence anyone asking questions. 3 days later, state authorities officially condemned the cabin site. Construction crews were ordered to demolish everything immediately. Richard Hall resigned before criminal charges were announced. But it didn't save him. 2 months later, both Richard Hall and Denise Carter were arrested for fraud, environmental violations, misuse of HOA funds, and conspiracy charges tied to the illegal construction project. The story spread across local news stations for weeks. Ironically, the HOA that constantly bragged about protecting property values became nationally known for corruption and environmental destruction. As for the lake, cleanup crews worked for months repairing contamination damage caused by the sewage dumping. Fishing was temporarily banned, while environmental specialists restored the shoreline. One evening after everything finally ended, I sat quietly beside the water watching the sunset reflect across the lake again, peaceful, the way it should have been from the beginning. A neighbor walked past and laughed softly before saying, "Crazy how one phone call destroyed the whole HOA." I looked across the water and replied, "No, they destroyed themselves the moment they thought nobody would fight back."